Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to a brand new video, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Arfad, and today we begin our introduction to the New Testament for Muslim. The reason why I've decided to do this is because I would like to contribute to the vast amount of knowledge that are currently available out there. And I'm not claiming that I'll be able to bring anything new, but hopefully I am able to contribute to the vast majority of scholarships out there. The reason why I've decided to aim this particular series towards the Muslims, it is because that it is based on my personal experience that a lot of my Muslim brothers and sisters have no idea as to what the New Testament really is. And I believe it is very important for Muslims to know the scripture of the Jews and the Christians. It is because that the more we know about their scripture, the more we understand about their background, and the more we can actually help them when it comes to understanding where they are coming from. And it is also it opens up the pathway for us to have a fruitful conversation, a conversation whereby we can have in a much better perspective if we know the background of Judaism and Christianity. Majority of the Christians, and well, in my area there's a lot of Christians, there's not a lot of Jews, and so that is one of the reasons why I've decided to study their scripture from an academic perspective. Bear in mind that the approach in this series will all be from an academic perspective. I do not believe in a faith approach because I do not subscribe to the theology of Christianity. And however, I subscribe to the historical and academic approach when it comes to studying the text of the New Testament. In this series, I will focus mostly on the New Testament, and I will not focus on the Old Testament because that is a completely different subject. And as a guiding principles, I will be referring to a book by Delbert Burkett, Introduction to the New Testament and the Origins of Christianity. And I'll also be drawing materials from Raymond Brown's abridged version of Introduction to the New Testament. So with these two introductory textbooks, I will use it as my guiding principles to deliver this series. So as an introduction, there are a couple of things that I would like to discuss. And first things and foremost is, what is the New Testament? Okay, what is the Bible in general? The Bible is made up of 66 books in the Protestant Bible, and the Roman Catholics have 5 more books, so they'll have 71 books. And the Eastern Orthodox, we have 81 books, and about 5 or 4 of them are council writings. So if some people really count them as 75 or 76, depending on how you count them. But it is 66 for Protestant, 71 for Roman Catholics, and 81 for the Eastern Orthodox. Obviously, these 3 are the major denomination of Christianity today. Obviously, we have the Ethiopian Church and so forth that will not be covered in this series. In fact, when I'm using the word Bible here, I'm mostly referring to the Protestant Bible, which has 66 books. And in these 66 books, 39 of them are Old Testament, and over 27 of them are in the New Testament. And that is, the New Testament is the second part of the Bible, because the Bible is made up of 2 parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Bible in itself, Bible basically means book, and scholars believe that, or scholars have been saying that the Bible is actually an anthology of texts. It is a bibliography, meaning the Bible, let's say this is the Bible, it contains a book within a book. Okay? It contains many books within a book. And these books were written in various centuries by many different authors and addressed to a different community throughout these centuries. Our main focus will be on the New Testament, as I've enumerated earlier. And in the New Testament, we have 27 books. And out of these 27 books, we have 4 Gospels. Gospels basically means good news. And we have 1 Acts. Acts can be considered as the history of the early church. Okay. And then we have 14 or 13 of Pauline epistles. Some scholars, more conservative scholars, especially fundamentalists, they believe that the book of Hebrews was actually written by Paul as well, although majority of other scholars believe that the book of Hebrews wasn't written by Paul. And so we have about 13 to 14 of Pauline epistles, and then the remaining books are letters as well, with letters of Peter, John, James. Okay, all these are attributed to the disciples and companions of the disciples of Jesus. But as we will come to know and see in this series, inshallah ta'ala, that all these attributions to the disciples and followers of Jesus is actually incorrect. And we will get to this once we get to the specific books of discussion. So out of these 27 books, the main important books are the epistles of Paul and the Gospels, because these are mostly read in church and these are mostly discussed. Okay, extensive discussion in the Gospels have been taking place for centuries even. Martin Luther, during the time of the Reformation, he actually wanted to reorganize the book of the New Testament. And so when he read the letters of James, okay, one of the books in the New Testament is called the Epistle of James. And James is believed to be the brother of Jesus. Now, what could the word adelphoi basically means in Greek? It could mean brother and sisters as well, okay, brothers and sisters. It could just mean brother, okay. When it comes to the Muslim narrative, the Quran is silent, and the hadith, authentic hadith, is silent as well. We do not know if James was actually the brother of Jesus. Brother in this sense could also be used as a means of a close companion. Okay, it doesn't necessarily need to be used as like physical, biological brother and sisters. But Allahu Alam, Allah knows best. Do I accept that James is the brother of Jesus? I neither accept nor do I reject, because the Islamic narrative is silent on this. Okay? But Christian tradition has it that James, the son of Mary, was actually the brother of Jesus. Now, this is more famous in the Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox belief, because the Roman Catholics actually regard Mary as the God bearer. Okay, Mary has a divine status in the Roman Catholic Church, whereas in the Protestant Church we do not have any of this sort of thing. Protestants do not make idols to Mary, to James, Peter, Constantine even. Roman Catholics do this, and so some of the practices in Protestantism and Roman Catholicism, as well as the Eastern Orthodoxy, varies. The Eastern Orthodox do not accept the papacy. They do not accept the Pope to be divinely inspired or to have divine authority. And so Eastern Orthodox, that is the difference between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic. Besides the variant number of books that they have in their Bible. Eastern Orthodox, so how does it work? I do not claim to know a lot about Eastern Orthodox. It is still a topic of my research. But Timothy Ware, I would recommend you to read the book by Timothy Ware, published by Penguin. and he speak about the Eastern Orthodox Christianity. It's a very fascinating book, I believe. So going back to the New Testament, what is the New Testament? The New Testament is made of 27 different books that have been composed beginning the year, according to Professor Paula Fredrickson, the letters of Paul, the epistle of Paul, was actually the first book to be composed in the New Testament, probably happening in the early 40s to around the year 62 or the late 50s or early 60s. Professor Fredrickson also suggests that the Gospels, the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were probably written from the year 70 onwards. 70 to probably around the year 110. We will be discussing this in more specific. I will be discussing this in more specifically when we touch the gospel itself. But for now, it shall suffice to say that the gospel was the second, probably the second part of the New Testament to have been composed. Now there are variants of opinions when it comes to the other books. Some scholars say that the book of Revelation, the final book of the New Testament, must have been composed around the 70s as well, and probably the book of Hebrews around that same period as well. And fundamentalists has it that the book of James, the epistle of James, was probably written earlier as well, because according to tradition, James was probably killed around the year 60s. Okay, this is according to Josephus. Josephus is a first century Jewish historian who survived the Jewish War of 70s. And we also have Philo of Alexandria, who is a contemporary of Paul and Jesus. But we have no reports that Philo actually met Jesus or Paul. And so our sources when it comes to understanding the New Testament, when it comes to the period of the first century, we do not have a lot of writings that are outside of the New Testament. When scholars are trying to find out the history of the first century of Christianity, there are a couple of sources that they would actually use, and they use the gospel, the three gospel, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they normally do not go to John, most of them. Okay, I will explain in a short while. And they also go to the 7 authentic letters of Paul. Now, what do I mean by authentic letters of Paul? Earlier on, I said that there's about 13 to 14 letters of Paul, but out of these 13 or 14, only 7 are deemed to be authentic by scholars. We will get to the letters of Paul much later on in this series, but for now, it shall suffice to say that the other 7 or 6 letters of Paul, scholars deem them to be pseudonymous, okay, meaning they have been subscribed to Paul, but they're actually not Pauline, and they're known to be plagiarism as well. And so what are the authentic letters of Paul? The authentic letters of Paul, the 7 of them, is Galatian, 1 Thessalonian, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Philemon, Romans. I think I'm missing one more. But anyway, let's move on. The gospel, in the New Testament, the gospel is arranged as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But actually, the first gospel to be written was the Gospel of Mark, and this is according to the consensus of scholars out there. A few centuries ago, scholars have been trying to argue that Matthew was actually the first Gospels to be written. But ever since modern scholarship, we know that actually Matthew copied from Mark. Okay, both Matthew and Luke copied from Mark, at times verbatim. And so it makes more sense to say that Mark was written first, because if Matthew and Luke copied from Mark, then Mark was written first. It doesn't make sense to say that Matthew was written first and then Matthew copied from Mark, because Mark has not even existed, okay, for Matthew to copy. The book of Acts was also written by the same author who wrote the book of the Gospel of Luke. And so when I read the New Testament, I would read from Mark first, and then I will read Matthew, Luke, Acts, and then I will read the Gospel of John, and then the 3 epistles of John, called the Johannine Corpus. Okay, the Johannine Corpus basically refers to the 4 books attributed to be written by John of Zebedee. Okay, the one of the companions of Jesus. Then I'll read the letters to the Romans. I'll read the Pauline epistles, the authentic Pauline epistles, and that's pretty much it. I believe these books that I've mentioned is authentic, and the rest of the books that are in the New Testament, as you shall come to see as well in the later course of this series, that the rest of the books in the New Testament are not authentic. Meaning they are not who they claim to be. And before we proceed further, the title that was given to the books in the New Testament themselves were only given much later, probably around towards the end of the 2nd century, by 180 CE, by Irenaeus of Lyon, okay, one of the early church fathers. Before this, we have Justin Martyr, okay, who, the reason why scholars believe that the title of the Gospels and the books of the New Testament were only given much later, it is because that when early church fathers, before Irenaeus, when they quote the New Testament, okay, the books in the New Testament, they do not refer to them by their titles. They basically refers to them as the tradition or the writings. Okay, and when Irenaeus refers to the book of the New Testament, he refers to them as the title. Okay, and so scholars believe that Irenaeus actually gave these Gospels the title. And how do we know this? Because Eusebius of Caesarea reported this to us. Eusebius of Caesarea was the early church historian. In fact, the only church historian that we have in whose writings have survived and in our possession today. Although the manuscripts there's a lot of problems in the manuscripts, but nevertheless, we will talk more about the text of the New Testament in the next video, as well as how the New Testament came to be. But it was attributed to Irenaeus. Irenaeus was the one who coined the titles of the New Testament that we have today, especially the Gospels. Okay, if not all the books, then the Gospels at least he must have coined it. And so, how do we know this? The second evidence as well is that the Gospels never claim to be written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There is nowhere in the authentic passage of the Gospels. When I say authentic, because the Gospels have undergone through, there's a lot of interpolation in the Gospel. We will get to discussing this once we get to the Gospel. But in general, there are passages that have been, because scholars claim that these passages are not authentic. They're not present in the earliest manuscripts that we have in our possession today. And so if they're not present, if these passages are not present in the earliest manuscripts that we have in the Gospels themselves, that means they must have been inserted later on down the years. And no doubt some of them have been discovered, okay? And some of these passages have been discovered to be inserted much later, especially in the Latin translation of the New Testament. The New Testament was written in Greek. Okay, all the books in the New Testament, the first language of it is Greek. It was written in Greek, and then it was translated to Latin by the 2nd and 3rd century. And then in the 4th century, we have Jerome, who translated the Greek New Testament to the Latin Vulgate. Okay, and this is pretty much the translation that carries on to the King James Bible. When the King James, the translator of the King James, when they translated the Latin to the English, okay, they're pretty much using what Jerome has came out with in the 4th century. There's a lot of problems when it comes to the Latin translation of the Greek, because first and foremost, Jerome, according to the consensus of majority of biblical scholars, Jerome, the Church Father Jerome, the translator of the Jerome Vulgate, he himself is not well versed in Greek, yet alone Hebrew. Okay, and there's a debate whether did Jerome actually translated the Old Testament. Okay, did he translate the Old Testament from the Septuagint, meaning the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament? Did he use the Septuagint to translate the Old Testament to Latin, or did he actually use the original Hebrew to translate the Old Testament into Latin? There's an opinion also out there among some of the scholars that actually Jerome did not fully translate the Hebrew Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, and that later on, after his death, actually some of his students or scribes translate the Hebrew text or the Greek Septuagint into Latin. We will never know the original answer, but the King James Version have undergone through major translation. When the RSV first came out in the 1950s, the RSV is the Revised Standard Version. It is the translation of the Greek to the English. And so the translators of the RSV, Professor Bruce Metzger, the late Professor Bruce Metzger, he wrote that there's a lot of problems when it comes to the Latin translation to the English of the King James Version. So there was a major need, a dire need to translate the Bible from its original Greek manuscripts. The NRSV came out in 1989, and that is the New Revised Standard Version, because more manuscripts have been discovered, and so it needs to be retranslated. Now, the NRSV is translated in a sense whereby the word adelphoi in Greek, it means brothers. The RSV, the first edition of the RSV, translated the word adelphoi as brother, but the NRSV translated the word adelphoi as brothers and sisters. Just to make it more towards the modern context, because the word adelphoi could also mean brothers and sisters. But Professor Dale Martin, a retired professor from Yale University, in some of his discussion, he actually said that the word adelphoi is actually meant as brothers in some of the texts. Okay, but it has been translated as brothers and sisters in the NRSV. And so scholars are pretty much divided. There's a lot of opinions when it comes to interpreting the Bible, okay, when it comes to biblical interpretation, and which is why I've decided to use two materials for this series. Now, I have many more materials that I will use, okay, but I'm grounding myself to just these two books that I have in front of me here. Raymond Brown was a Catholic priest, okay? And Delbert Burkert, I'm not sure about who he was, but I just found his writing really fascinating. Okay, but no doubt he is a brilliant scholar as well, because that's what I use his book. And I will also recommend you to actually read these two books. Okay, Raymond Brown's book is published by Yale University Press, and Delbert Burkett's book is published by Cambridge University Press. Okay, so an academic publication. Now, each lecture or each talk, I would call it, is gonna be about half an hour or so, because of the limitations that I have in my gear. My camera can only record half an hour, and I believe half an hour half an hour is excuse me, half an hour should suffice. So in the next video, we will discuss about the text, okay, the manuscripts, the text. I will talk more about textual criticism, so on and so forth. And all this is to prepare my viewers, okay. Again, this series is aimed towards the Muslims out there, because Christians will probably know a lot about the New Testament because they go to Sunday school. So anyway, my name is Arfad, and I'll see you on my next video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.